Coming up, how childcare costs here are rising more than anywhere else in the country.
It's 10 years since the ban on fox hunting, but has it prevented cruelty to animals?
And the MP asking for a change to the name of Birmingham Airport. That's at 6. Coming up, how childcare costs here are rising more than anywhere else in the country. That's at 6.
Now the latest from ITV News Central in the Midlands.
Hello and welcome to ITV News Central. On the programme tonight, how childcare costs here are rising more than anywhere else in the country.
A decade after fox hunting was banned, has anything really changed?
And what's in a name? Why one Midlands MP thinks Birmingham Airport needs a Shakespearean makeover. Good evening. The cost of nursery care for under-2s in the West Midlands has risen faster in the past 5 years than anywhere else in the country.
A new report out today says spiralling costs mean that for many families it simply doesn't pay to work. Keith Wilkinson reports from a nursery in Birmingham.
A big worry for many parents, the rising cost of childcare. In the West Midlands, over the past 5 years, the price of part-time nursery care for under-2s has gone up more than others. 5 years ago, the average cost was £77. It's now more than £112 for 25 hours, an increase of £35.77. Meanwhile, for the same region, average wages since 2010 have risen from £378 to £389, an increase of just £11.
By July this year, we will have spent as a family £75,000 for my son who's in the preschool class and my daughter who's in the toddler class, £75,000 over 3 years. I think it's astonishing. It's absolutely outrageous.
I think for one, it's bearable, but the fact that we've got another one on the way, that's going to be a really tight squeeze. And we've just been talking about like how many hours would it be suitable, like even working arrangements, whether my husband, he works full time, whether he needs to work all his hours within 4 hours, so at least then it's not as many days in nursery with the two of them, because it is just so expensive.
Really hard, because even though they help with 60%, like the government help with 60%, they basically stop your rent, because when you're working full time you have to pay full rent yourself. So even though I'm getting help one way, it's losing out the other way, so it still works out forking out the same amount. So more or less my whole wage more or less goes.
The government, however, says it's done a lot to ease the burden for many parents.
The system is under continual reform. When we came into government, the free entitlement was 12.5 hours. We've increased it to 15. That's £370 a year per child. That is saving for parents. But we've also introduced tax-free childcare, which is coming on later.
Despite the help, many families say it's not enough and they're struggling. Keith Wilkinson, ITV News.
So how worried should we all be by the rising cost of childcare? Well, earlier I spoke to Helen Beresford from the 4 Children charity, and I asked her how concerned she was by the report which says that it was no longer cost effective for some people to work.
I think today's report really underlines what we already know and hear from parents across the country. 4 Children parents have been telling us for some time that actually childcare costs are a real barrier to them getting into and staying into work. So yes, today's report really is quite alarming in terms of the increase in costs over time. But this has a real impact for parents. We know that actually the impact on them, it can be significant. You know, parents tell us they have to cut back on treats and even essentials. And actually back at the beginning of this year, 4 Children surveyed parents, and around a fifth of them told us that they were going to have to give up their job or reduce their hours of work because of childcare costs.
There will be some people who say, well, parents should give up their job. Traditionally, one parent, or almost always the mother, but one parent stayed at home to look after the children. What's wrong with that?
Well, modern families really want to make a choice about what's best for their family in terms of how many hours they work and how they support their families. You know, working life has changed significantly over recent years. You know, there are more parents, for example, who are working shifts, some parents working 2 jobs. We really need to find a way to get a modern childcare system which supports modern families.
So what do you think is the way forward then? How can we make it affordable for people to use childcare and keep their careers?
Well, we at For Children say, first of all, we're in a general election year. You know, parents tell us they want this to be a priority. So we're calling on all political parties to firstly put this at the top of their agenda for the election, to really put in place a system which helps families. And in the longer term, we want to see political parties commit to a universal childcare guarantee over the next 10 years. So actually parents really can make that choice about going back to work and doing what they believe is best for their families.
OK, Helen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
10 years since the ban on fox hunting was introduced, the chairman of a hunt in Warwickshire says he's seen no evidence that it's prevented animal cruelty.
Animal welfare groups say it's been successful and are using the anniversary to get the law tightened even further. However, huntsmen in the Midlands say it needs to be repealed, as Stacey Foster reports.
A scene campaigners fought to stop. But at the meet near Shipston-on-Stour yesterday, a decade after fox hunting was banned, an all too familiar chase.
We were hunting within the law. That's what we'd set out to do today. We've laid trails and we've hunted trails. What you saw there and I saw was one hound seemingly chasing a fox from a piece of woodland. That in itself is not illegal, but what I did was to immediately get round where I could, in front of the hound, stop it and send it back to the huntsman. But he had all the rest of the other hounds in the wood, and I then went to him and said, look, I think we're in danger here of hunting a fox. If that hound had caught that fox, as I say, you can hunt actually with up to 2 hounds, and that wouldn't have been illegal. But we would have been embarrassed because it's what we're trying not to do.
This hunt survived the change in the rules in 2004 because they used trails of animal scent for the hounds to follow.
We've got a thriving hunt here in Warwickshire with as many members and hunt supporters as we've ever had, great morale and as much support as we've ever had from farmers and landowners. But the law is a very, very bad piece of legislation. It doesn't work.
But campaigners disagree. The League Against Cruel Sports told ITV News on average 1 person every week is prosecuted under the Hunting Act's provisions. Of these, over 2/3 are found guilty. It wants the law strengthened and proposes tighter rules on trail hunting like this one, and also tougher sentences increased to a maximum of 6 months imprisonment.
We're passionate about our hunting and feel very strongly that we're not doing anything wrong. If we thought it was cruel, we wouldn't do it. It's been going for a very long time, which doesn't necessarily justify it, but it's a means of control and it's available to farmers and landowners as a method of control, along with shooting, along with netting and things. And then there's the other side who feel equally passionate. If you want to deal with animal welfare, then this piece of legislation needs repealing, ripping up, and having a fresh look at the whole issue again.
The Tories have hinted at a possible vote on the issue if they win the general election. Labour have pledged to protect the law. Organisers of the Warwickshire Hunt say this fox got away unharmed. But 10 years on from the ban, the fox hunting debate isn't going anywhere. Stacey Foster, ITV News.
A Midlands MP is calling for Birmingham Airport to change its name to attract more visitors. John Speller, the MP for Worley in the Black Country, wants the airport to be called Shakespeare International. He says tourism to the UK is increasing and believes the Shakespeare brand has worldwide appeal. He's convinced changing the airport name would encourage tourists to look beyond London. An official at the airport thanked Mr Speller for his interesting comments and said the airport had seen a growth in passenger numbers and is working to increase numbers in the future.
It is 76 days to the general election and just 3 weeks to the ITV News Central School Report Debate. Well, next month, students from across the West Midlands will be taking part in a discussion programme about the issues that matter to them. Opinion polls might show high levels of youth disengagement, But that's not what we found from the students we've been speaking to, like these in Sutton Coldfield.
I think it's important that young people get involved with politics because we need to be informed that when we're 18 so we can make the right choice.
I'm not old enough to vote in the general election in 2015, but if I was, I'm unsure of who I'd vote for. However, I'd still participate, even if it meant spoiling the ballot. At the end of the day, if we don't do politics, politics will do us.
A taste there of what some students in the Midlands think about the general election, youth disengagement and politics. And you can see a special debate featuring students from the region talking about those topics on ITV News Central early next month. The debate also has its own social media hashtag, ITV School Debate, so do keep watching.
Right now, let's get a bit of sports news. And Birmingham City earned a point against high-flying Middlesbrough last night. Well, Middlesbrough's goalkeeper was given a red card towards the end of the first half for bringing down Clayton Dawson after a poor back pass. Paul Caddis gave Birmingham the lead from the penalty spot, but 10-man Middlesbrough were still able to claim a point when Patrick Bamford scored in the 74th minute, denying Birmingham a morale-boosting win little more than 24 hours after their parent company went into receivership.
Well, it's certainly been raining today.
Hasn't it just?
In and out today. And it is now to find out if that rain is going to continue. So let's get the weather forecast. And with the details, here's Janelle Aldred.
What's in store for today? ITV Local Weather, sponsored by Centre Parks.
Hello and thank you very much to Stephen Bailey for this fantastic picture of people on the lake. Not much lake action today because it was very wet indeed, but that rain is clearing. Now we can take a look at what happened earlier on today, and that rain really was very persistent, lingering on over the West Midlands, but it's finally continuing its journey south-eastwards. That means we're expecting tonight to be a dry night, some clear spells, looking at lows of around 1 Celsius, but we aren't expecting to see a frost overnight despite that low. Into tomorrow morning, well, there's some brightness to start the day, especially in the north, very sunny indeed, cloudier in the south, but by the end of the afternoon, we're expecting increasing amounts of cloud to mean it's cloudy for most of us, looking at highs of just 6 Celsius, not as warm as it has been today, just a touch milder, but for tonight we are expecting the rain to clear, a dry night to come.
ITV Local Weather, sponsored by Centre Parks.
And just before we go, let's give you a reminder of tonight's top stories on ITV News Central. The cost of nursery care for under-twos in the West Midlands has risen faster in the past 5 years than anywhere else in the country. It's gone up by £35, while average wages have risen by just £11.
10 years since the ban on fox hunting was introduced, huntsmen in the Midlands say it doesn't stop animal cruelty, but animal welfare groups want the law tightened even further.
Now you
may
probably
have noticed.
Yeah.
Shorter programme. We're almost ready to go home. Well, you are. That's because, of course, there's some live football on later tonight. But the news does continue on itv.com/central. All the breaking stories can be found there. And I will be back at 11:15 with more stories from where you are, but from all the team for now. Have a very good evening and thank you for watching.
From us, good night.